Let me see your knitting.
Woo! So it's like black and purple. It looks blue. My camera does weird things. And then on the other side, it's purple and black.
Oh.
Yeah, it's so cool. I'm like, as I'm going through, I'm like, this is real magic. Like, I swear to God.
Welcome. You are entering a strange realm. A realm of what ifs. What if movies, television shows, and video games were better, worse, bizarrer, or downright different? What might they look like? Find out on today's episode of CineCasters.
Welcome back to the CineCasters podcast. This is the show where we watch movies, TV shows, and lots of other kinds of media, and we talk about them and pitch them back to each other in order to try and make maybe a little bit more sense out of them, or make the themes work a little bit better, or just generally change them because we've got some different ideas. I am Janglez, and today I'm joined by Alyssa.
Hello.
And today we are talking about... You got the giggles or something like that?
A little bit.
Okay.
I had a lot of fun watching this movie because apparently I've seen it before, but it was not very
that was going to be my
memorable,
question. So today we're talking about R.I.P.D, or the Rest in Peace Department, which is a clever play on words. And this movie is full of clever plays on words with things like the eternal affairs and whatnot. But it's a 2013 movie featuring Ryan Reynolds and Jeff Bridges.
Apparently I've seen it before. My Netflix, I logged in, clicked on it, and went, why am I at the credits?
Oh. So was it your Netflix, or do you share it with your family?
I share it with my family, but I have my own profile.
Your own profile, yeah, that's what I mean, like your profile.
Yeah.
Okay.
So apparently I've seen it. I watched it and I was like, I have no recollection of watching. Maybe I was like half asleep the whole time. I don't know. That's happened before. I have watched things half asleep and gone, I think I vaguely remember this.
Well, you did talk about something that was similar to that when we did Pixels.
What was that?
Do you remember we did the movie Pixels? Do you remember that movie?
Yeah.
Okay. So
and it just wasn't that memorable, so I remember it. I just don't remember anything happening in it.
But you remembered things differently. It was like this weird mandala effect. You were like, I remember this happening.
I've had that a couple times.
I thought that this happened, but then it didn't happen. But I remember specifically Pixels. I know you've said that's happened before in other movies, but... That
happened with the last one we did too, which
Dracula
was
Untold.
Dracula, where I was like, I think I remember this differently.
Yeah. Well, you've been on a roll because you've been hitting me up like, we should watch this movie, we should watch this movie, with all these movies I've never seen before. I had seen The Wild Wild West before, but and I'd seen Into the Woods, which we both have. But recently, you were like, let's do Dracula Untold. Let's do this movie. I don't know what else movie we have. But even back in the summer, we did a bunch of like these sort of like gothic retake on fairy tales with... The Last Witch Hunter, which was fun to pitch, and The Sorcerer's Apprentice. And I still cannot tell if they're all canon to you, if they're all like one continuous story, if you just stuck them all in one universe.
They feel like one continuous universe.
Just all one.
I don't know why.
Dark
it's just
fairy
my
tale
brain
universe.
Is just like, they are the same.
Is that why Dracula Untold was like, could have been the origin story for your like universe? Is that why you were so upset when they didn't do the Dark Universe thing?
I think so.
Because you already had like your own headcanon. But think about it this way, because you have your own headcanon, now you get to keep it. Like if they'd created a Dark Universe, it would have become like by their own rules. Now you can keep your own canon.
Yeah. That's true.
I don't know. That's the beauty of your own imagination. What did you think? Apparently you've seen this movie before. What did you think the second time, I guess?
It felt like the first time. So yeah, I don't know. I liked it. I thought it was really funny. I like Roy because he finds everything hilarious.
Yeah. I wanted to like this. Okay, I went into this movie being like, this is going to be a lot of fun, and I was disappointed.
Oh, see, I went into it going, I think I watched this, but I don't remember anything. So the whole time I was going, have I seen this? So I was kind of distracted by that the whole time
by your
that I was
own,
watching it.
Like, inexplicable ability to remember if you'd seen it before. When I say I was disappointed, I mean I didn't think that, or I didn't find this movie unfun. I had fun with this movie. The problem was there was so many cool ideas, and I didn't think it was like well thought out. Like I didn't think it could have been so much bigger and cooler. Like, especially because we're dealing with like the undead. But I didn't like the fact that they sort of had their own like. First of all, Deado is a stupid name. It's a really, really dumb name. And the R.I.P.D. and Eternal Affairs, as I said, was kind of clever wordplay. But it just felt like this was like knockoff Men in Black mixed with the Adjustment Bureau. Both of which are movies that we've done and will come out on CineMasters Classic. So,
yeah.
But like to me, it just felt like a knockoff of both of those. And as much as Men in Black is not great, and neither is the Adjustment Bureau, this movie was also not great. And it's like, I don't know, it could have been so much better. Like, especially like you're dealing with the undead. Why not just go full head first and be like, that's what I did with my pitch. I was like, I'm not doing this Deado thing. I'm like, there are zombies and vampires and ghouls and evil things, and they're all undead, and that's the way I'm doing this, because I don't know. It felt like this movie created its own world and then kind of ignored it a lot of the time. And and there was some really cool like tonal things, like things were dark and creepy at times, but never committed. And in fact, the ending suffered from that early 2010s thing where it was like the climax is just a big hole in the sky.
Yep.
They did it with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the second one.
Yep.
They did it with the Fantastic Four movie. They're just like
the Avengers.
Yeah, with the Avengers. There's the end climax is just a hole in the sky that's eerie and looks like it's going to destroy the world. Which is fine. It worked in the Avengers because there was like motivation, but you can't just be like hole in the sky and that's the bad thing now. There's got to be stakes other than just
I liked that
hole.
they set it up in this one though, where it's like the hole in the sky is something that you go into when you die, but then they reversed it. Like it made sense with this movie a lot more than I think a lot of the other movies did.
I will give you that,
we're
but it's
talking about.
It still felt maybe perhaps if other movies hadn't done the hole in the sky, then it would have felt less cliche. So cheap. Yeah, because I don't disagree with you. I do think that the setup was there to be like, this is this is how it works, and so the reversal of it is like a big hole in the sky, except backwardsies. Which is weird, because if it's a backwards hole in the sky, why is it sucking things up?
I don't know.
You know what I mean, right? Like the idea was to reverse the hole so that all the dead bodies, all the deados would come back from judgment or whatever. So why is it sucking things up if it's supposed to reverse? I don't know. This again, I don't
know. It was very strange. You would think that it would be like blasting off, you know?
Blasting off again.
Like a bad fart. I don't know.
Like a bad fart? That's a terrible analogy.
No, it's not.
Okay, the other problem that I had with this movie, moving on from the farts, the other thing that the other problem I had with this movie is like I didn't catch it really any themes.
Oh, there were none.
Yeah,
like not really.
And which is because I Ryan Reynolds and Jeff Bridges and Kevin Bacon are all great actors. It would have been nice to see this movie be flashy and action, which it was. But then at the end, it relies too much on its CG. Like Kevin Bacon becomes entirely CG. We're like, where's the plot? Where's the themes?
Okay, my main issue with the tonality? CG thing was actually just that, like, not only did they become cartoonish to look at, but they also, like, their mannerisms and the way that they spoke became really cartoonish.
I wonder... So when we did Fantastic Four, we talked about how the studio actually went back and reshot the last like 20 minutes of that movie as reshoots. I wonder if this was a reshoot as well.
Maybe.
Like they were trying to do like, and that's why, because you're right, like even the mannerisms, like the way they talk all of a sudden becomes a little bit more hokey, all of them.
Yeah, and it was really weird and just kind of uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah. Actually, a lot of this movie was kind of frustrating for me. Like, even the whole that thing that they need avatars.
Yeah,
that's the word that I'm using. But like their whole undercover thing.
That's what they called it on IMDb.
The whole undercover thing where they're like a beautiful woman and James Hong, who I love, by the way, great Chinese American actor, is the one who plays who's like Nick's Avatar, but it was sort of like, feels unnecessary. Why not just have it so people don't recognize them? You don't need to have this whole stand-in thing.
Yeah.
Like, especially because
it was really weird.
It's really weird, and then they just continually objectify Roy's character, and they do some funny bits with it, but it's not worth it. It doesn't add anything to the plot. Like, I felt like there should have been. I mean, I did it in my pitch. I was like, I needed a theme. I wanted there to be a theme. And I was hoping that this movie was going to be something like Constantine or The Witcher, where you're fighting like undead creatures. But instead, it just comes across as this like PG-13 pseudo action movie, when it really should have been like a rated R mature horror action movie, where you have like when you watch The Witcher and you see like monsters rip people's faces off and Geralt has to fight them, except this time it's with guns and one of them's a cowboy. Like, that's exactly what I want. That's exactly what you want. I know it is.
It is.
Yeah. Because the fact that one of them is a cowboy, for me, when they introduced Roy, I was like, yes! Oh, this is going to be like Men in Black, but with undead, and one of them is a cowboy. And it was, but it wasn't cool. It wasn't cool. Why wasn't it cool?
I don't know. I don't know what their aim was with this movie, other than just to have something maybe goofy. I don't know, because it's also Ryan Reynolds. I feel like they couldn't make it too, I don't know. I've never really seen him in anything like quote unquote scary.
Well, it doesn't. Oh yeah, I mean, but it doesn't even have to be like unfunny.
He is
like
pretty, right?
He's a comedic actor. Go away. He is a comedic actor, but that doesn't mean this had to be unfunny. Like, it just could have been like scary. Sometimes humor in a horror movie can work really well because it lightens the mood, especially if it comes across like your characters are also a little uncomfortable, and so they're cracking wise in order to try and like break the tension that they feel, relieve their own anxiety. That can be really, really useful as both a tonal thing for you, the viewer, to be like, oh, haha, it's funny, and still be anxious, but also then the characters come across like, the reason Nick is a wisecracking asshole is because he's uncomfortable, whereas Roy doesn't make wisecracks during the uncomfortable scenes because he's like, that's when he clams up. And then you have the reverse be true, like when they're out on the street, Nick is the serious one, but Roy is the wisecracking, like ne'er-do-well, because then it shows like how do each of them cope with what's happening. That's an easy way to show character. Yeah, I don't know. I wanted this to be, I thought this was going to be scarier. Like, I wanted it to be scarier, which is weird because I don't like horror, but I think this could have been the right amount of like spooky, scary skeletons along with action and comedy that would have made it like perfect, especially if the characters meant something. Because I like the idea that we've got here. In fact, like I changed a lot in my pitch, but the basic setup is pretty much the same because I think there's something here that really, really works. I don't know. Except for I thought the CG was a little cartoony.
Yeah.
I think they relied maybe a little too heavily on it, especially at the end. I also think it was weird to me that they decided to do the end climax in broad daylight.
That was strange as well.
Like, just the idea, like, I mean, we're talking about things that are dead and whatnot. I don't know. Maybe they just wanted to make the concept of death less scary. I don't honestly know. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm really struggling. I really struggled with this movie. What I did notice, actually, I thought this was kind of clever. I didn't do anything with it, but I thought about it, was what if, when they're going through, and this is another tonal issue that I had with the movie. Do you know when they're going through and Roy is teaching Nick how to find where a deado is? Mm-hmm. And he's like, you just look for the rot, and he finds lots of things rotting, and they go upstairs, and it like slowly gets creepier and creepier. And then the entire interrogation was almost played like comedy. I had a problem with that. Just the tonality of it, but I thought the setup for that would have been really good if the payoff was really good, because it slowly gets creepier and creepier. But one of the things that I thought about was like, what if the R.I.P.D is just as corrupt as like the way people feel about a lot of other police forces nowadays?
Yeah.
And what if they aren't in fact actually trying to just stop people from dying, but the reason that they're looking for the rot and whatnot is because it's actually like just poverty and racism in terms of how they're collecting dead people.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
I know. I thought that was a really, really cool idea, especially because you could really play with like concepts around how people are looking at police forces nowadays and be like, hey, the reason why people don't like police forces isn't because they don't like police. It's because they don't like the corruption or racism or what have you around how these police forces operate. And now we have this fantastical police force that deals with dead people, and it's subject to all the same corruption and problems. And then it becomes, instead of just being this fun romp through, the afterlife killing deados, it becomes this still that, but it also becomes like a deeper meaning as we look critically at how police forces operate in terms of race and culture and poverty, and that to me is a really, really clever movie that could have been in here. I'm not saying that this movie did any of that. I'm saying that's what I saw that I could have taken it in my pitch. I didn't go that direction.
Yeah.
What about you? What were some of your goods and bads?
Honestly, we've kind of done most of them already. The one thing that kept coming back throughout the whole movie that I thought was really, I guess, fun, was the whole like relax body.
Oh yeah.
Line. I thought it was funny. But I didn't really have anything else in the movie that really stood out to me. I guess this is going to sound so mean, but I guess I don't remember this movie because it's not that memorable.
It's not that memorable. And it really
Because even while I was writing my pitch, literally like I was trying to write my pitch the same day that I watched it. And then I didn't, and I wrote it this morning. And the whole time I was like, what happened again?
Yeah.
And I was paying attention during the movie. I just don't remember.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's so even the way that the sort of like MacGuffin is set up, the staff of Ajax or whatever they call it, Jericho, yeah. The way it was set up and whatnot was even circumstantial. Like it was coincidental that it happened to be Nick who like had part of the gold and died, and then his partner. I also felt like the betrayal from his partner was interesting. But it shouldn't have been the end villain. Like there should have been.
Yeah.
It felt too convenient. Is a lot of what this movie is. Things just like sort of fall into their lap because they want them to fall into the lap. For instance, they go after the Deado. The Deado has gold that matches what Nick has. Like, come the fuck on. You can't honestly tell me that the first person they're going to meet has something to do with Nick on the first day of his job. Like it's so convenient.
Yeah.
And that's frustrating.
At one point, Hayes actually calls one of the other Deados boss, though. It was the big guy.
Yeah, which is weird. Like, he's the boss, isn't he?
Yeah. So I just got really confused at that point. I was like, wait, who's running the operation? I thought it was
This is what makes me
Hayes.
think that there might have been reshoots.
Yeah.
At the end, they had Kevin Bacon come out as the bad guy when really I feel like there was somebody else, because they even say that that Hayes, the big guy, was Hayes's fence, which makes me think that like, okay, so Hayes is involved with something, but he's not the end villain. Like there's something else going on here. Mm-hmm. Which also makes me feel like maybe this movie could have been set up for a sequel, and they chose not to do it.
Yeah.
Because
they might have.
Like it does feel like there's a lot of setup here, but I wonder if the ending was a lot of reshoots, that big climax, because to me it feels like even the CGI Kevin Bacon feels a little not poorly done. Like it looks visually okay, it's cartoony as we mentioned, but it feels rushed.
Not really final bossy.
Yeah. Say you said not really final bossy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sort of just feels like he is not the final boss. He provides an emotional crux for Nick, because if Nick can overcome the person who killed him, it shows like an emotional growth through transitive properties. It's not well done, but certainly I see the point. But it doesn't give us this big kind of finale other than the big hole in the sky. Which is why, what makes me think the reshoots happen. A big hole in the sky raises stakes without having to like actually say anything. Because like raising an army of the dead is actually far scarier instead of just a hole in the sky. But the army of the dead becomes, or at least the return of the Deados actually becomes almost secondary to the hole in the sky itself. The hole in the sky presents a larger risk than the return of the dead.
Yeah.
Even though thematically the return of the dead would have made more sense because that's what the R.I.P.D. works against.
Yeah, not a hole in the sky.
Not a hole in the sky. Yeah, so I think, I didn't do any research, but I think this movie suffers from a reshoot. That's what it feels like to me. I can't say that for certain, but...
Yeah, just the stuff at the end that just doesn't quite connect.
Yeah, and to be clear, when I say reshoot, I don't necessarily mean like it was reshot. I mean somebody either after the movie was finished and the execs wanted something changed, or during the writing something changed so that the climax... But something cohesively in the last act didn't form with what happened prior to that.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about that. How did you feel about Ryan Reynolds in this movie?
I don't know. I thought he did pretty well.
I thought he was just kind of boring, actually, even for Ryan Reynolds. Now, Ryan Reynolds usually plays some variation of himself.
Yeah.
But I think maybe...
There was none of that. He was very serious in this one.
Very serious, and there wasn't a lot of wisecracking or anything like that. And I actually found him kind of bland, especially when put next to Roy. Jeff Bridges as Roy, I actually thought was like a standout in this.
Yeah, it was funny because to me, Jeff Bridges should have been the serious guy. I think that they just decided we're going to break you two out of your usual roles. And it just became really weird because I thought that like Jeff Bridges, Roy, seemed like he should have been the Lone Ranger type of guy.
He was-ish.
But instead, he's a wisecracking fool.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Nick becomes this like, 15 years on law enforcement, like I know what I'm doing. And it's like, I don't know.
Edgy.
I don't think that he maybe should have been the wisecracking fool. I was fine with Roy the way he was. I liked it. I thought Roy was interesting because they had done like, what if someone from the 1800s, or 1700s had died and was that, but also now had to like deal with the change in reality.
Yeah.
Like the fact that Roy still calls them Injuns and doesn't make a distinction between Native American Indians and people from the Indian subcontinent Indians, right? He doesn't make that distinction, and yet he still very much cares about people not being racist.
Yeah, there was at one point where he's like, watch the slurs.
Yeah, and so it's like I think it's interesting, and they could have done more with that character. I think it's interesting to watch a character who like has to deal with the change in times and the things that he knew, and certainly he could slip up, but it's just trying to find a way to make the character feel realistic while still coping with a change in sentimentality and in culture. I thought that was actually apparent, but it could have been explored more.
I liked how he drove.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like his actual dangerous driving. I like the fact that he had like one leg up.
Yeah.
And he was driving with his left foot.
He's driving with his wrong foot. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, that just seems like exactly like what someone would do if they didn't know how to drive.
Yeah. I agree. It feels good. I feel like he should have been a bit more of a fish out of water, though. That would have been funnier.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy that. The reason I brought this up is because it's not that Ryan Reynolds being serious was a problem. It was that he didn't have a character really at all.
Yeah.
And that's the problem that I had, is that Roy is this big, bombastic character, and ideally you'd want to have a straight man, which is what they tried to do with Nick. But instead of having a straight man who has goals and motives, we get a straight man who's rather boring. He's blank. He's a stuffed shirt. It's just a guy there. One of the things that Men in Black...
The male equivalent of the lamp?
Yeah, exactly. Except except he's not pretty, except we've already been over this.
He is pretty.
But he doesn't even take his shirt off, so like what's the point? No, my point is one of the reasons I think Men in Black works so well is because at its heart, it's a buddy cop comedy. And I think this is as well, except Jay, who is our rookie and ostensibly our main character that we follow, is has personality. He has a character. He feels real and good. Whereas in this, we're following Nick, and because Roy is the comedic, like comic relief for the most part, then Nick is what? He's boring. He has nothing. He has no personality. His personality feels like...
I think his whole shtick is just him being stuck in the past.
Yeah, which is fine, but there's no personality behind it. It's all just convenient sort of set up plot points. There's no... to me, his personality is just white cop. There's no...
Checks out.
Yeah, there's no, like... Yeah. Other than loving his wife and being a white cop, what else does he have? He's mildly corrupt, I guess. But, like, does he enjoy squash or tennis? You know? What are his pastimes outside of being a cop? Does he...
Yeah, what does he do with himself?
Yeah, does he like baseball? Like that one seriously, that one Deado that they meet who like is watching the baseball game?
Yeah.
He has more like personality than Nick does.
Yeah. I liked that Roy was like, "Yeah, you should pick up an instrument." Like, honestly, yeah, playing an instrument tells a lot about a person, especially when you look at what instrument they play.
Especially when you think about how good or bad they are at it, right? An excellent way sometimes to convey information is to be like, yeah, this person plays the saxophone, but like they just dabble. Like they're not a pro. They just and it's like, oh, okay, saxophone is something fun that they do maybe to pass the time, but it's not something they're serious about. That says a lot about someone, but we don't get that. Mm-hmm. There's no details in his house. Nick is a boring character, and I think what brings this movie down is that he doesn't affect the plot. The plot affects him.
Yeah.
Whereas Roy is the opposite. He affects the plot, except the plot isn't about him. Stuff happens because Roy makes it happen, but he has very little to do with the plot. This is Nick's story, not Roy's. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's irritating because I want to like this movie. I want to like both of these characters, but it's really, really funny. I do have to say though that Proctor is a useless character. Yep. Just even the whole like there's like this romance that she and Roy, this love-hate thing that they've got going on, doesn't do anything for me. It's a complete waste of time. Her character is uninteresting and unfunny. Like Anybody could have filled that role, and why? Yeah, boring. Yeah.
Yep.
Any goods about this movie?
I mean, I said like just a lot of it was just funny things that happened.
Yeah, there's a lot of good gags in there. The movie, I will say that the movie does commit to its bits, which is nice to see. Like they continually come back to the relaxed body. They continually come back to the cumin being the thing that makes the Deados like appear as Deados. Yep. Which they didn't give any explanation for, which is fine, but they committed to it. Anytime it needs to happen.
Well, Roy said at one point, like, "Oh, we're not sure exactly what does it, but we think it's the cumin in it, maybe." And then it is.
And then they commit to it, and that's fine. It works. It doesn't make sense to me, but fine, whatever. At least they committed to the bit. Other than that, and I did like the concept. I liked the wordplay. Eternal Affairs is just funny as opposed to like Internal Affairs. It would have been also funny if there was like an Eternal Affairs and then an Infernal Affairs.
Yeah, that would have been funny.
Like from both sides. I did enjoy that this movie sort of plays with conventions of Judeo-Christian morality, or at least death and afterlife, but without committing hard to them. There's no mention of like a god. There is a mention of judgment, which means there must be some kind of afterlife in terms of like the good place and the bad place, but it doesn't commit that hard. And while that is nice because it's not committing to Judeo-Christian ways. It's also aggravating because it doesn't give us a lot of world building.
Yeah.
Which is something that I thought you would bring up. The world building in the movie itself is pretty wishy-washy.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot to go off of, just in most cases of, what's happening. How did the R.I.P.D. come to be?
Yeah. Yeah, what's the origin? Like, I want that story.
I want to know that.
Yeah. You'll like my pitch then.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Speaking of pitches, I think we're ready to go. I got nothing else.
Yeah, I don't have anything else either. Just that some things were really funny and some things were really goofy, but not in a good way.
I wanted to like this movie. And I was left disappointed.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna go first. Is that?
I was just about to ask, and you just like cut me off. Like, yeah.
Well,
you said you had a really, really good idea, but this was also.
I had a good idea. I don't think I executed
it
well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had some really cool ideas, but I forgot one of them, and I had to rewrite it. And it was just kind of a little bit of a disaster.
You told me last night, you were like, I have a really cool idea, but I'm super tired, so I'm going to try and write it in the morning. That was a mistake. You should have committed and gotten it out last night. It was a mistake. I should have done it. I would have been done it by like 2 a.m., but whatever. Whatever. Don't procrastinate.
Okay, so I got my handy dandy notebook here. So we start. I didn't like the introduction that they did where it's like, you think you're having a bad day at work. Like, I thought that was really stupid. I hate
those kinds of bookends.
So instead we actually start in the garden with Nick burying the gold and planting the orange tree. We get the weird look that his wife gives him in the morning. And then the discussion with Hayes as Nick is like, I want out, because she knows something's up. Which never comes back up again.
Nope.
Like, you would have thought that as soon as Hayes comes back... Sorry, this is like completely off topic from my pitch, but like as soon as Hayes comes to be like, did he bury anything, or did he like was he acting weird? She should have been like, oh yeah, he brought in a tree randomly in the middle of the night.
But he does dig it up.
Find that suspicious?
They do dig it up.
Yeah, but you would think that it would have come in a little earlier.
He digs it up and he finds the thing.
Like
finds the what is it called, the gold, and then when like, under the tree, and then and he's like, oh, she thinks terrible of me, but then that doesn't really pan out. No. Anyway, sorry.
And there were just a lot of weird, spots that just kind of, I don't know, the way that they were acted or the way that they were written just didn't feel real, I guess. Anyways, sorry. So back to the pitch. Hayes, or Nick tells Hayes that he wants out. Same kind of thing happens where they're chasing a bad guy. And Hayes kills Nick, and Nick almost gets sent to judgment, but is snagged by Proctor, and they have the whole explanation of what R.I.P.D. does. I didn't really change a whole lot plot-wise, but I think that you'll find some of the... I turned this more into a comedy.
Oh, okay.
So, we'll see. But yeah, I think you'll find some of it funny. So Nick gets assigned to Roy, the most senior officer at the precinct. Not by choice. Like, he's the most senior, not by choice. And they head off for Nick's closure and for their first mission, which is supposed to be like a really easy one. So they go through, same kind of thing happens at Nick's funeral. And once it's done, he tries to go to Julia, but when he runs through the crowd of cops, he literally runs through them.
Oh.
And they all just kind of shiver, like the temperature just dropped, and Julia continues on, not noticing anything.
He's a ghost.
Yep. So, Roy is, he's there. He's just like, that's rough, buddy. And then they continue on with the first job that they have to take. So apparently this is supposed to be like a really easy one, just to get Nick into, used to seeing what goes on. I left them as deados because I couldn't come up with a better name. Roy shows Nick that they can walk through walls, and technically they can possess items or possess people,
so
but
they're ghosts.
Neither of those things are allowed. They're ghosts. They're literally like the R.I.P.D. Like they're ghosts.
Yeah.
So the best way to check if someone is actually a deado is to knock on the door and see if they can see you. because normal people can't see dead people. So they knock, the guy looks at them and they talk for a little bit. They're not dressed like cops, so he doesn't know, like, oh, they could be R.I.P.D. That he just thinks that they're maintenance for the building. And it turns out that certain words in a certain order will, I hated using that term pop-a-dedo. But again, I kept it because I had no brain power and didn't know what to change it to. So Ray goes on to kind of do that throughout the conversation. So certain words will kind of like trigger like a change. And then, yeah, the same kind of thing happens where Roy's like, all right, Nick, here's your first guy, bag him, right? And then, yeah, he eats the thing and runs off. So Roy and Nick chase down the deado and they kill it. The gold, similar to the stuff we saw Nick bury at the start, is taken in to evidence and they write up their reports. And the whole time, Nick is like, something is going on. And I think it might have to do with how I died. And he tells Roy this instead of just holding it back because that really bothered me. And Roy is like, man, you got to let go. Like, you're looking into things that they're not there. Like, but Nick hasn't told him that he had a connection to the gold. So we get the same scene of Nick kind of convincing Roy to do something of like, yeah, let's do police work. Like, this is just what we're supposed to do, even though we don't have a job. Like, let's do it. So off they go and they meet with Roy's informant. They give him the gold piece, tail him, whatever. That same kind of thing happens. Hayes, picks up the gold and implicates Nick, and all that happens again. So Roy is like seriously offended. He's like, you knew about the gold and you didn't tell me. And he's like, I didn't know what it was. I wanted to figure it out and I wanted to see who else it might be connected to. We just stumbled upon it. We thought it was gold, right? So they continue to tail Hayes. And then they accidentally pop that one deado, the big guy. They try to contain him, but he manages to get loose. And there's no like weird fight as they try to contain him because they're ghosts. They can't really do that much other than shoot their guns and hope for the best.
So it's not like a public menace.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of is, where the deado kind of just escapes and runs off. And so some people see it, but it's not like a giant thing. So they come back to the precinct, they get in trouble with Eternal Affairs, and they find out that it's the Staff of Jericho. And then Roy and Nick get their suspension because Roy runs his mouth to Eternal Affairs again. And then, they decide that, you know what, screw it, they're cops. Or in Roy's case, a lawman. And, that's what they do, even if they are about to get, what was the word?
Erased? Is that the one you're looking for?
Erased. I think so. Is that the word they use? I don't know.
Whatever. Deleted.
Either way. Deleted, yeah. Canceled.
Only if you're on the internet.
Yeah. So they're like, you know what? Screw it. We've already broken a bunch of rules. Let's go. So they head off and they try to chase down the big guy again. But what they weren't expecting is that the big guy was going to meet up with Hayes again. And Hayes seems completely unfazed by this new appearance that the big guy has taken on. And so they're like, oh, that's really suspicious. So now they tail Hayes again, and they find him and they chase him home. After Hayes has met with the big guy, and Roy and Nick are like, all right, here we go, classic. We're just gonna do it the same way we did our first mission together. We're just gonna knock on the door, and if he sees us, then he's a deado, and if he doesn't, then I don't know. We'll just have to do some more investigating, I guess. So they knock and he doesn't see them, But Roy is like, okay, that's weird. And he goes back to the car, and Nick is like, angrily stomps through the wall and starts like just messing things up in Hayes' house.
Mm-hmm.
And Hayes is like, Jesus Christ, Nick, I was trying to make this easy for you. It would be hard for you to take me in. And so they have a little fight.
Yeah.
And by little, I mean the house gets destroyed, and we find out that Nick or Hayes is a deado, and all that stuff. And they get him in the car to bring him in. And I liked the conversation that they were having about like how Hayes died but came back. And the way... There was one thing that I wanted to add in that I thought would be really interesting, and I kind of forgot it, but now I'm remembering it. So this is just my thought process as we go through, is that at one point he's like, oh, I died like 1,000 years ago.
Oh, damn.
So he's been around for a really long time. And he's just like, and I was just having fun, pretending to be human and having a partner at the precinct and blah, 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 blah. So he's been around for a while. But that's all that they know, because now they're at the precinct and they drop him off, and they're putting stuff into evidence and all that. And then the same thing happens, because I thought that was really cool, that scene with the like sonic grenade thing.
Yeah, it was all right.
I thought it would be cool because you can think of it as like the deados were fine because they have physical bodies still.
Oh, but the R.I.P.D. aren't,
and because now that the R.I.P.D. are actual ghosts, it affects them.
Okay, see, that makes a little bit more sense, because at least you're putting rules to it instead of just being like this.
That's why I made them ghosts. I was like, they're ghosts. This is how it's going to be. So they have like their Ghostbuster equipment that the deados use that are just relics, I guess. And that's, I just needed something to explain it, because there was no explanation towards the relic. Just, it's a relic. They have relics for everything these days.
It's so soft, right? I need some hard magic here.
Yeah. So the same thing happens, and the deados escape with their pieces of the Spear of Jericho. And Nick and Roy head off along with other R.I.P.D. officers to track down the deados and destroy the artifact. The same thing kind of happens, but instead of Haynes sending off his buddies to go pick up Julia, he goes himself. Mm-hmm. So and then while he's there, instead of trying to convince her to come with him, he just pops himself, like he just turns himself into his form, and Julia faints. He's like, it's easier this way.
Aw, just swoons? That's dumb.
Well, I wouldn't say swoons, but yeah. I mean, what else would your reaction be to someone turning into a dead form of themselves right in front of you?
Well, they don't look particularly dead in this movie, so it might be like, get a crowbar.
Yeah, but Nick had like part of his skull missing.
Get a crowbar, man.
I guess.
I mean, I might be scared, but like, it wouldn't be faint.
Anyway, so Nick, Roy, and the other officers are fighting their way up to the top of the building, where we can see the glint of the spear. Nothing has opened yet. That just seems so stupid. And they find out once they get up there that they can't interact with the spear once it's full, which it is now.
Oh.
It's not quite complete yet, but it's like the spear itself is whole. So they could hold the gold before, but now they can't touch it.
Okay. So by spear, you mean the staff?
The staff of Jericho, whatever you want to call it.
No,
it looked
I just
like
want
a
to be
little
clear.
tower in the movie. But yeah, they can't interact with it. So Hayes shows up with Julia, and kind of laughs at Nick and Roy, who are like desperately trying to shut it all down. And then Roy comes up with an idea. He's like, it's technically forbidden, but if you were to possess a person, you can do whatever humans can do. In this case, you could touch the Staff of Jericho, the Spear of Jericho, whatever it's called. So Roy is like, she's your wife, man, go for it. Which is like not good, but whatever. And
consent is important.
Yes, but this is a life or death situation for the entire universe.
Yeah.
Maybe not universe, but and I'm not saying that consent is not important in those cases.
I know what
but
you mean.
yeah. So Roy is like fighting off Hayes as best he can while Nick apologizes to Julia before taking over her body. Anyways.
Well, you could do that. You could have, when he possesses her,
yeah.
he like, while he's in her body, he can communicate with her. Like she experiences the possession. So that way, while he's possessing her, you can have like a reconciliation.
That's what I was thinking of them, like, you know, one hand each on the steering wheel kind of situation where like they're both in control.
Where he like possesses her body and she's like, whoa, what the heck? Get out of me. And then he's like, but Julia, it's me. And she's like, whoa, you're alive? And he's like, no, I'm dead. I'm possessing you. And she's like, that's a thing? You can be like, yeah.
That's...
And he'd be like, and then he explains like, I don't have a lot of time.
And that's where you could get like the comedy come in and it would be funny.
Yeah. Also, then you can have consent because she would be like, I don't want you here. And then he would be like, but it's me. And she would be like, oh, but it is you. Okay, you could stay. And then at the end, she could be like, stay forever. Like, we can do this. Like, you could stay. And he's like, I can't stay possessing you forever. Yeah.
Yeah. That would be, this is why I keep you around. You give me good ideas. But anyways, so Nick and Julia together now head over to the staff of Jericho and they go to take it down. But Hayes, who's managed to toss Roy off the roof, just goes to like finish the I wanted to call it a ceremony. I'm assuming it's a ceremony. It involves human sacrifice. By stabbing them in the back. And Nick, still mostly in control, kind of gets Julia somewhat far away from the staff, but it's still taking her blood. It was doing that like really cool thing where it like just turns into like a stream. I don't know. It was cool the way they did it.
They had to do that because they can't show too much blood because it has to be rated. Like under a certain level. And if you show blood of any kind, especially human, then you run the risk of higher ratings.
Yep. But I thought it was cool. So Roy, who is actually hanging off the side of the roof, manages to topple part of the building next to the building that they were on, and basically the same ending happens where Julia almost dies and gets to like have a final moment with Nick. Also, while I was writing my pitch, for some reason, every single time that I was about to write Nick, I almost wrote Tim every time. I don't know why.
His name's Tim now.
Like he just seems like a Tim. And then it ends with, like, the whole scene ends with Julia in the hospital room, and she thinks she sees Nick, but it was just her imagination.
It was just Tim.
Or was it? Because she could be a deado, because we don't know.
Yeah. Or it was Tim.
Or it was Tim. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good.
But I just didn't want to end it with that stupid, like, because they didn't have the avatars, so he wouldn't have been a Girl Scout.
I like this better.
But I also wanted it to end and start a little teeny bit more seriously while having those like gags of like ghosts just walking through walls and like walking through apartments to go interrogate this person. Like,
I think yours works better
really
because the fact that they're ghosts, like you've laid down some hard and fast rules to be like, this is how it works, this is how it's going to be. And that way things are like a bit more explained. So even like even though the R.I.P.D. in the world there isn't quite more explained, or is still not quite fleshed out, you're still like, okay, they're ghosts, like 100% they're ghosts, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that.
And then I had some ideas of how they could, because I said at the start, like you could possess items, or you could possess people, and the possessing people is obviously forbidden.
Yeah.
And I forgot to add in that they still get that like extra time on their sentence or sentence.
Whatever.
Contract. Whatever. But yeah, I had some ideas of like how could possessing items help you fight these like half dead people?
Well, it might be interesting to have a scene where Nick possesses an item to try and converse with Julia.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, but my brain was not working, and I was so. Yeah.
Okay, so my movie is, I did quite a bit different. Like, you kept yours pretty solid, but I did quite a bit different. So my movie starts out with an action sequence where Nick, like right into it, Nick and his partner, who I named Charlie Hayes. So Hayes is his last name, Charlie. They're doing a drug bust. It's just a small time thing, just the two of them, but they come across, like, the peddlers were also packing some gold, or at least holding it. And Charlie, it's not a lot, but Charlie and Nick, they're like, yo, we'll split it and we'll, like, save it for whatever you need, but, like, that's quite a bit of sum of money, so, like, just hold on to it. So that night, Nick comes home and is super worn out, and he tells Julia about his day and all that went on, minus the stealing the gold part, because they didn't put it into evidence. And he can see that she can see that she's worn out, but she has some good news for him, which will cheer him up, and that she's pregnant. And in the middle of the night, we see Nick burying something in the backyard, and he plants a tree where it was buried. And the next morning, he tells her about the tree, and he's like, I know it's not big enough now, but when our kid is grown up, the tree will be big, and I'll build a tree house in it. And she's like, okay, the tree's going to take a little bit longer than that to, like, be able to hold a tree house. Like, and he's like, oh, and they joke about having, like, maybe we'll have more kids to justify the tree growing, right? So it can be this funny kind of family moment. Back in the precinct, Nick tells Charlie, he's like, I'm out, I can't do this, and he gives some of the gold back. But they do it surreptitiously so that no one notices. Then they get called out to a big bust. It's all hands on deck, and Charlie betrays Nick and shoots him. But Nick doesn't die. Instead, he wakes up in his own body, but in the morgue. And he's been brought back to life by a woman named Hattie, who says that she basically runs something that she created called the R.I.P.D. And he's like, oh, that's super cute, R.I.P.D. But basically she says what's happened is he's been suspended, his soul's been suspended in space and time. So she has this ability where she can suspend people's soul in space and time, so he's neither dead nor is he alive. Okay. His soul is what they call a suspended soul. So he can work for the R.I.P.D. in exchange for a chance at closure with his wife, or he can choose to pass on, right? And Nick chooses to stay. So the R.I.P.D. consists of different people. It's much smaller than what we got in the movie. It's like, I don't know, like 10 or 15 people that all work for Hattie, and that's it in the entire world. And basically they have similar skills to Nick. Not all of them are police. Some of them are even criminals, but basically they're all people who are suspended souls who then Hattie gives them the choice to stay or move on. So unlike the RI, basically what their job is to do is to make sure that things that are undead either die or stay dead, and that they pass on. So unlike the R.I.P.D. officers, there are a lot of things out in the world that they don't want to stay dead. So Hattie explains that, like, all the horror stories that you hear about undead creatures, all of that is 100% true, and occasionally people who are alive can see them, but generally they can't. But because the R.I.P.D. are suspended souls, they can interact with both the living and the dead, which is really, really useful. So basically their job is to, like, go down and make sure people move on. So whether that's helping a ghost move on, sometimes it's helping a ghost realize that they've died. That happens. Sometimes it's a zombie, a ghoul, all the classic undead things. So Hattie teams Nick up with Roy, an old cowboy who has been an officer for a long time. We can get this back and forth banter between the two of them. He's like a lawman, exactly the same character. Roy thinks they're going to track down Nick's first undead. Roy thinks it's a ghost and somebody who probably doesn't know or remember dying, and they'll have to help it move on. And that doesn't involve any guns. Like, I want it to be clear that sometimes the R.I.P.D. doesn't they don't need to shoot. So sometimes it's just helping the ghost realize they're dead and then telling them to move on before they become bitter or violent. So Roy chooses him to look for the signs, which isn't always things rotting, but he's like, if the ghost isn't malicious, sometimes it's nothing at all. You have to be a little bit more creative. But this creature turns out to be a ghoul. It's something that's become bitter and can't move on because of vengeance or whatever. And they can have a fun action sequence as they chase this ghoul. But what they find on the ghoul is some of the gold pieces, and Roy explains that a ghoul usually needs, like, a reason to become embittered. So, like, if it had, like, taken gold and the greed, that would be a reason to become embittered. But Nick recognizes the goal and tells Roy, he's like, so my partner had something to do with gold that was very similar to this, and he shot me. We also find out, Roy also explains that the reason he stayed on the force for so long is because he's also in it for closure. He's like, I need closure. I want to kill my former partner when I found out he was undead, and then he killed me for it. I want closure, vengeance. But he doesn't elaborate further. The movie remains basically the same. There's no deados because that's dumb, but they fight all these undead things. It turns out that Charlie is also an undead and can't move on. He's a ghoul. And this is because all the ghouls in New York won't pass on because something has been making them, has been killing them, and the ghouls are after vengeance. And that's the thing that they're working on. And Hattie's like, well, so there's more to the undead than just like creatures that won't move on. Occasionally there are evil forces out there, and sometimes people who try to like use the undead for nefarious purposes. And this might be one of those people. And we can, more action happens, and it turns out that the ghouls aren't actually ghouls. They're vampire spawn who have been made to look like ghouls. And that's why. So this vampire named Vincent wants to use the gold pieces to create an obelisk so that he can raise the dead. And Hattie is like, you have to stop him. Vincent's like super bad dude. Vincent also happens to be Roy's former partner who killed him when Roy found out that he was a vampire and couldn't die. And then Vincent was like, I'm just going to kill you. Vincent needs a blood sacrifice to raise the dead, and he needs like the blood of an innocent. And he is now determined that not Julia, but Julia's unborn child is innocent enough that it will work. So when Charlie goes to find... Basically, Charlie then goes to find to Julia. He's going to steal her, but he also needs the last piece of gold that he thinks Nick saved. And so they dig up the tree, but in the bottom isn't like under the tree isn't gold buried. It's a time capsule. And when Julia opens it, it's filled with bonds that Nick had bought. And they're there, and it has a note, and it basically said, like, he's like, it's about the legacy he leaves behind. He's like, I didn't want to have any regrets. Like, I know I'm a cop, but I didn't want to have any regrets. So he didn't take the gold, but she didn't need to know that. He just says, I didn't want to have any regrets, but I also knew that there was a possibility that I might not live to see my kid grow up because I'm a cop. So I needed to make sure there was something there. So the bonds will, of course, mature over time, but he wanted to make sure he left something behind, his legacy to leave behind. So Roy and Nick then go and fight Vincent against Hattie's orders, and then she shows up and says she's going to deal with it. And we can have this awesome moment where Roy and Nick fight. They're like shoot off and fight their way. And Nick gets this moment where he like can shoot out and shoot Charlie in the face and saves Julia. And he speaks to Julia and says, it's about the legacy, right? It's like I have to move on now because I died, and I have to be okay with that. That's just the way it is. I can't stick around here. Otherwise I'll be embittered like all these other undead things. So it's revealed that the reason Vincent wants to raise the dead isn't because he's a bad dude. Well, he's a bad dude, but he's like, I'm not here to like bring people back to life. I just want an army of zombies so that I can stop other people from coming back from the dead.
Okay.
He's like, I just want to stop other people from coming back from the dead. So it turns out that Hattie is actually a necromancer and Vincent is a vampire, and the two of them were in love years and years ago. And they, both of them basically were like, we have an idea of what we want to do to stop people from coming back from the dead. When they were alive, they were like, we got to stop people from coming back from the dead. We got to make sure they move on. And they had different ideas. Hattie wanted to use suspended souls, but Vincent didn't, because he was like, well, you're basically just lying to people. You're making sure that they have a reason to be stuck in the world, right?
Yeah.
A reason to be stuck in the world, and then you basically use them. He's like, I don't want to do that. I want to use zombies because zombies are like corpses that don't have intentionality. And Hattie's like, well, that's gross because then you're just using people's bodies. And Vincent's like, yeah, but they're done with them. Like, they're not using them anymore. And so, but basically what wound up happening is the two of them wanted so much to like be one up the other one that they then became a necromancer and a vampire because they like became embittered. they couldn't move on
Yeah.
from their own issues even after they died. And so, yeah, basically, like, Nick and Roy are like, well, what the fuck is going on here? Like, they both want the same thing, but they realize that what Hattie's doing to them is basically the same thing that Vincent wants to do. They've been given a choice to, or they've been given the option that they can move on, or they can stick around and do her dirty work. But in order to do that, they basically only are there until they realize, until Hattie releases them from their contract, or until they, which will only happen when they like finish their unfinished business, right? Yeah. So both of them like sort of look at each other and they're like, well, I guess this is the way it's going to be. And Nick shoots, Roy shoots Vincent getting his vengeance, and Nick shoots Hattie. So both of them are dead. And the irony is now that Nick has now like realized that he has to move on. He has to die. Right.
Yeah.
And Roy has now finally gotten vengeance on Vincent for, betraying him. But the irony is now, because both Vincent and Hattie are gone, they're both stuck as suspended souls.
Yeah.
So now they're both basically like, well, even though we can move on, we no longer have reasons to like linger, and we no longer are embittered, which is what all the Undying are. We want to move on, but they can't, because they're both stuck as suspended souls until they find a way to get out of it. So they sort of look to each other and they're like, well, I guess we're going to continue to help other undead people move on while we search for a way to move on ourselves. And they, establish the new R.I.P.D, but I'm not going to call it that because that's a dumb name. So it'll be called something like, I don't know, Eternal Affairs. That's actually pretty clever. But basically, they become like the reason that we have, like they're undead police officers who help people move on, but they've both given up their vengeance. In Roy's case, they're ready to move on, but they can't, which is why I think it's ironic. Yeah. But the idea, what I wanted here, is this all about the legacy you leave, right? That's the theme. And it's also all about like, can you let go of the things that keep you keep you from moving on? Can you let go? Because all the undead people can't let go, but neither can Roy, neither can Nick, and it turns out neither can Vincent or Hattie. And in the end, Roy and Nick learn to let go, but they can't move on. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
While you were talking, I realized I forgot the other part of one of the things in my own pitch.
Which is?
So you remember how it was like, oh yeah, Hayes has been around for like 1,000 years?
Yeah.
So that he's been searching for this gold the whole time.
Okay, yeah.
Taking jobs all over the place. And then he just happened to find it.
Yeah.
And he thought he was going to use Nick as the human sacrifice.
Okay, yeah.
So it was all supposed to be like coming full circle, and I just forgot to add that.
Yeah. My only problem with my pitch, because I like the themes that I had, my only problem with my pitch is I still couldn't figure out a way to like make the gold less convenient. Like something that sort of just happens to Nick.
Yeah.
I really wanted it to be like something that they like maybe detective their way out of, but I needed to keep Julia in the story somehow in order to have Nick move on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And it was a tough one to pitch, but it was good. Like, I had fun watching it.
Yeah, like I said, I really wanted to like this movie, and it's not a bad movie by any means. It's very middling, and I mean that in a good way. Like, it's a solid action film. It just has some huge flaws that are unfortunate, but I would watch my version of the movie. I would even take another pass at it and like make it as a full script because I really like the themes that I had in there. But any last minute thoughts about R.I.P.D? No. I just wanted to be really more scary, more horror, I think. More undead, less like deados as this stupid comedic term.
I really wish I could figure out like a better word for that. Like something like a play on words for that.
I just said undead because I was like, everybody knows what that is. Let's just go for it.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
You can find me at twitch.tv/AlyssaLou with 3 O's, or you can find some of my creative handmade stuff at Alyssa Rose Handmade on Instagram and Etsy.
You can find our band Robot Philosopher anywhere you listen to dope music. Stay tuned for new music from us. You can also find our other channel, the CineMasters, for more scripted content and lots more episodes of CineCasters right here. So thanks for chilling with us.
Bye.